So welcome everyone to our latest Gate 1 webinar, Out of Sight, Out of Mind. We'll be spending the next 45 minutes looking at how organizations can design a truly digital workforce. So this webinar is actually part of a wider series. We've previously hosted sessions on distributed workforces, followed by organizational agility, so helping you quickly replan what your organization needs to do, and then also a session on building resilience through times of change. So just to introduce your speakers today, my name is Neela and I'm a digital workforce and tech adoption specialist here at Gate 1. And I'm joined by two people. So we have Alice, our producer in the back end, making sure everything runs smoothly. And then also my co-host, James. So hi, James.
Hi, Neela. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So yeah, I'm James. I'm a principal here at Gate 1. I specialize in delivering operating model transformation and strategy programs. Super excited to talk to you all today. I'm currently working on a digital people transformation for a large UK client. And, it's great to see how some of the elements of the model we'll discuss later are already being put into use. So I think if we get the slides up, Alice. Brilliant. So yeah, just to start, I just wanted to take you through the agenda we'll cover in today's webinar. So first, we'll provide just a short overview of who Gate 1 are and the services we provide. Next, we'll discuss, why on earth are we still talking about remote working in 2021? After this, we'll look at a simple model, which should help to explain how we can move forwards from our current ways of working. And then lastly, we hope to leave you with some guidance and tips on how to get started. Obviously, throughout, we'll share some stories and some research, who's doing this well, and talk you through our findings. However, rather than us just talking to you, we'd very much like this to be a two-way conversation. So please do use the chat and the Q&A feature within Zoom to sort of post anything, and we'll do our best to pick them up. We'll also be running a couple of polls throughout, and again, it would be great to get your participation in that. So firstly, just to briefly touch on who we are as an organization, Gate 1 are a specialist transformation consultancy, and we support clients with the 4 services you can see on the left. Some of the clients we have worked with can be seen on the right. The content we'll be discussing today draws on thinking across all 4 of our capabilities. But enough about us. I'll hand over to Neela to kick us off with the current reality we find ourselves in.
Thank you. I thought it was quite important to start with this. Why are we still talking about this? We've been working from home for almost a year. Surely we know everything that there is to know about this new way of working. Well, debatable. So we were forced into being part of a full-time digital workforce, and to make that work, we immediately attempted to replicate what we did in offices in the home environment. So if we had a 2-hour Thursday meeting in the office, we transitioned that into a 2-hour Teams or Zoom session. But that sort of imitation doesn't work for very long. It definitely has its limits. You can pretend to be Angelina Jolie on an online dating site, and you might pique some interest and you might get a few swipes, but you'll soon get found out, if you're going to meet the person in real life. So just to transition onto the next slide then. When it comes to remote working, after about a year, we're beginning to see the impact that sort of imitation is having across the workforce. And you'll have noticed a few of these headlines in the news. So going from stress and anxiety that it's causing employees, to the corrosion of trust and culture. And then this important question around productivity. So in the middle of 2020, so somewhere June, July time, a lot of studies were published that said, well, actually, remote working is fantastic for productivity because look at how much more people are doing. They're attending all of these extra meetings. Peer-to-peer meetings have gone up, manager to employee meetings have gone up, and all these extra hours are being delivered. But it's not sustainable. And just last month, there's been more studies and headlines that say, well, actually, we're beginning to see the limitations that has. And so at the individual level, then, the impact that we're beginning to see is workplace isolation, fatigue, and burnout in some cases as well. And bringing all that together, at the organizational level, you're beginning to see lower levels of engagement and lower levels of connection amongst the workforce, which then translates into reduced innovation. So it's quite difficult to be creative if you're not sort of sharing that energy with other people around you, and you're feeling quite lonely and isolated. And that in turn has an impact on customer service. And I wanted to highlight one particular study by Microsoft and Wharton University as well. So they conducted a large-scale study, so interviewing 3,000 employees across Western Europe to see how remote working felt for them. And there was definitely a strain on company culture, and people felt like they were working more in silos, which was then hindering innovation as well. So that's a little bit about what we've experienced up until now, and I'm sure you'll have felt some of that sort of stuff yourself. And I just now wanted to talk a bit about predictions for the future as well. So the predictions that we're talking about here mostly relate to office workers, and we recognize that it doesn't speak to the great work that frontline workers are doing, and we'll cover some of that later on in the session, but this bit is predominantly for office workers. So for the short to medium term, that's the next 6 to 12 months, a few things to be aware of then. The first point being around hybrid working. So we're seeing that the majority of leaders and employees on a whole actually do enjoy the flexibility that remote working provides, and they want to continue with some sort of hybrid working. It might not necessarily be 5 days a week in your spare room surrounded by plants, but they want some sort of hybrid working. And to call out a couple of stats here, 88% of business leaders want to continue with hybrid working, and 72% of employees want to be part of a hybrid model. And there's a great economics professor from Stanford, his name's Nicholas Bloom. He's a remote working expert, and he says that the optimal split is actually 2 days at home and 3 days in the office, and that helps you balance collaboration and focus time as well. So in conclusion, prediction number one, hybrid is here to stay. But hybrid is actually a lot more difficult to lead. So you are providing two very different sets of experiences to your workforce, and that's truly going to be tested as we continue to roll out vaccines. So you'll get to a point where those who have been vaccinated will quite enjoy coming into the office, a couple of days a week, and those who haven't been vaccinated will want to shield, for a while longer at home, and you're left with this two set of quite different experiences in your workforce, and also with your customers as well, if you're thinking about your customers. So you run the risk of creating this us in the office and them at home mentality, or a out of sight, out of mind mentality for those who are at home for a while longer. And to bring that to life, you might think, what's the problem with that? They've chosen to stay at home. But to bring that to life, James and I are both Gate 1 employees. Come June time, when more and more people have been vaccinated, James chooses to go back into the office, and I don't. And up until now, I felt quite smug about staying at home because I've avoided the Northern Line and all those expensive prep coffees. But James being in the office has increased access to leadership, and all those extra cups of teas and pre-meeting chit chats, and the ability for him to be seen in the office and take all his important calls and solving all those important problems quite visibly allow him to progress his work. And I don't get that level of exposure being at home. Over time, I might end up feeling less included. I might not have access to the sort of communications that James has access to. And what that means is that I feel like I need to explicitly advocate for myself so that I feel seen. So you can see the sort of behaviors that it might encourage as you have these two different sets of experiences. And you might have seen these sorts of behaviors manifest themselves in your organization already. And the final point being that these social components that bring employees together, unless you proactively address them for a virtual environment or for a hybrid model, whatever you're choosing to take forward, unless you do something about it, you run the risk of creating a out of sight, out of mind mentality. And which brings me on to my final point, you're then more likely to experience retention issues going forward. And so just to flash those 3 points, so I realize I've been doing a lot of talking, but the 3 points there are: hybrids are here to stay. Think about the diverging employee and customer experience that you're about to create as COVID vaccines are rolled out. And unless you do something about these differences in sets of experiences, you're quite likely to experience retention issues going forward as well. So I will now hand over to James, and he's going to talk to us about slightly longer term predictions as well.
Thanks, Neela. Just before I talk about robots taking over the world, as this slide looks like, we've actually got our first question in. So thanks, Jill. So I thought maybe I'd just pose this straight back to you, if that's okay, Neela.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see there being a definite split between vaccine have and have-nots? I think that's to your second point.
Well, from the sort of stuff that we've been reading in the news about vaccine hesitancy and different age groups displaying different, preferences, potentially younger people feeling a little bit more invincible and they might not want to go for it necessarily. It might not be a definitive split, but I think it's likely to have an impact on the experiences that are created. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, completely. Yeah, I don't think we can 100% say either way, but I think, managing that split, whatever that split may be, is going to be critical to, as I say, maintain that sort of community of the remote and the office-based workers.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so yes, moving on. So now just looking at slightly sort of longer term predictions, so sort of year plus out. So, as we know, robots are slowly taking over the earth, and this increase in AI, robotics and digital will continue to place a greater emphasis on emotional intelligence across the workforce. So a recent HBR study states that those that want to stay relevant in their profession will need to focus on skills and capabilities that artificial intelligence have trouble replicating. And this is really about understanding, motivating, and interacting with human beings. So what you can do, therefore, is look at how you're helping your staff develop these skills, be it through training, coaching, taking on stretch opportunities, and try not to, fight the progress of technology, but welcome it into your industry and see how it can be sort of complementary to your workforce rather than simply being seen as taking it over. So next, we've seen that geographic constraints have been minimized as companies rethink where they hire staff from. No longer will a requirement for a new hire be that they can simply, get into the office easily. The last year has shown that companies have been able to shift their workforce to remote working and continue to operate. Now that restrictions are being eased and recruitment may well be ramping up for some, organizations can look to broaden their workforce planning approach and tap into resources from a much larger geographic area than was previously possible. A recent survey showed that although 87% of executives said they were experiencing skills gaps in their workforce or expected them within a few years, only 28% said their organizations were making effective decisions on how to close that gap. So really, therefore, can you get ahead of this game and change your approach to workforce planning and address this gap through reskilling or recruitment? And lastly, I think everyone has sort of noticed that the ongoing COVID crisis has accelerated consumer focus on sustainability and planetary change, with organizations now needing to react in order to maintain relevancy with their customers. A recent study stated that 70% of people are now more aware that human activity threatens the climate and the environment. And this is therefore driving organizations to rethink how they operate. And we are already seeing changes across all sectors, from beauty and cosmetic products to even sustainable investment funds. So obviously how each organization needs to respond will vary on, based on their sector, be it ethical sourcing of products, reducing carbon emissions through their supply chain, or simply even improving recycling in their head office. But more broadly, businesses need to embed sustainability into their core operations rather than simply relegate it to a nice-to-have function that can be cut during tough times. So just to recap on those 3 points, increased AI, robotics and digital would continue to disrupt roles and capability requirements, increasing the emphasis on EQ. Geography constraints will change the war for talent, demanding a rethink in workforce planning, and growing interest in sustainability will reshape how organizations operate and prioritize. So now we are going to move on from the current reality we find ourselves in and start to look forward at how best to adapt our growing digital workforce. As the title says here, hybrid working is here to stay, and we've said that before, but how do we really make this work? And actually, before sort of discussing this further, what we'd like to do now actually is open up a poll with you guys on the call and ask how you have made remote working work for you. So we're going to use Pigeonhole to hopefully create a bit of a word cloud. So either if you use your smartphone to scan the QR code, or use the URL on screen. It'd be great just to type a couple of words or phrases in how you've made remote working work. And while people do that, we've got a question coming in from David. Do you see digital working expediting the drive for offshoring? Ooh, interesting. I think, you know, offshoring, onshoring has been an interesting one in tech, and has sort of flip-flopped over the last decade or so, from potentially, you know, early 2000s where offshoring was all the rage to now, you know, onshoring, now nearshoring. Whether it will drive offshoring, not sure, Dave. I think, as I say, geography is definitely becoming not a barrier to skills and the workforce anymore. So it's certainly been shown that you can drive teamwork and collaboration across geography. So maybe we might start seeing, you know, a drive back to offshoring. Neela, I don't know if you had anything else to say on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, with the organizations that I've worked with, I've already begin to see elements of that enter into their strategy discussions. So I think it's likely to drive a bit more of that, actually. So we've got quite a few things coming in on the word cloud, and I just wanted to ask James what your how you've made it work.
Just seeing them come in now. What have we got?
Of them.
That's brilliant. Thanks, guys. I mean, yeah, for me, I mean, it's a bit cliche, but walking and podcasts. So very fortunate to have a park very close to me here in London. So where possible, trying to, you know, deliberately put a break in the day to get out and stretch the legs. And we are certainly not short of podcasts. I think that's one thing that this crisis has been good for, is podcasters. So be it a good rugby podcast, good business podcast, or, you know, any sort of thing, just to sort of switch off for a short break, you know, refresh and come back. So that's been great for me. Anything in the word cloud sort of sparking your interest, Neela?
So improved home office is the one that's coming up time and time again, getting fresh air, walking meetings. I think these are a lot more professional, a lot of like personal branding here than mine. Mine is treating myself to some boot camp in the evening and then a show called Benidorm. So nobody is sort of revealing that sort of thing, but that's what's kept me going. Brilliant. So all of this is, you know, it's around things that we've been doing as individuals to make this work. And what we wanted to do now is go through what you can do at an organizational level and what leaders could be doing to make this work. But yeah, all great recommendations here. So based on the conversations that we've had so far with clients over the last year and the work that we've delivered across different organizations, we have created a model to help you think through designing a digital workforce. We love a model because we are consultants after all, and for some reason we especially love a pyramid. But sitting across this model, we have 3 distinct layers, so enable, connect, and involve, which are then surrounded by 6 components. And I'll step through these components at a high level, and then we'll take a closer look at them and show you innovative organizations that have put these into practice as well. So at the enable layer, we have enabling social technologies and workforce management. And at the connect layer, we have the community element, and then consciously designing the physical and remote split. And then at the evolve layer, we have your digital workforce strategy, so thinking about that. And then the employee-centric process redesign. So what do you do with your processes so they're more employee focused? So that's the model. And just to go back to the original question, how do you purposely design a digital workforce as opposed to reacting to this chaos around us? I think what we're noticing is that a lot of organizations have already thought about the enable tier, and the answer now lies in being able to progress on to connect and evolve. So that's the model at a high level, and James is now going to talk us through the enable layer.
Perfect. Thanks, Neela. So yeah, just going to sort of walk through the enable layer and highlight a couple of companies that have been seen to do well in this area. So as noted, first, the enabling social technologies, which is all about providing employees with the technology they need to get the job done. And this could be simply providing them new hardware to improve their home working setup, or installing software to boost collaboration, or moving towards, digital tools to improve virtual ways of working. A recent study showed that employees who are satisfied with their tools are about twice as likely to have maintained or improved their productivity as those who are not satisfied with their tools. Now, we may be on Zoom today, but at Gate One, we're big advocates of Microsoft Teams. We're not Microsoft salespeople, but we do love it. And we've used this for video calling, instant messaging, and team collaboration. And it's really helped us, get through the last year and remain engaged with both, the rest of Gate One and also our clients. And actually, I'll continue talking, but if there's any kind of great bits of tech that you've been using, it'd be great to sort of chuck them in the chat, and maybe it's something that people haven't heard of, and maybe we'll just touch on them. So any great bits of software or tech you've used, it'd be great to see them in the chat. Someone else who has utilized Teams is the NHS as a whole, but in specific, this sort of case study is the Wirral University Teaching Hospital Trust. It's one of the busiest trusts in the Northwest, with over the workforce is over 5,000 people. And again, I really am starting to sound like a Microsoft salesperson here, and I didn't know this before sort of researching this, but Microsoft announced that they would help the NHS by providing Teams to them for free. So I thought this was a bit of a nice sort of a win-win story. That they've been doing that for the NHS, and this obviously has enabled Wirral to keep staff communications running smoothly during the pandemic, and has also helped clinicians hold essential meetings and share important data with each other. So what have we got? We've got Mural. Yep, we're big fans of Mural here. We use that a lot. Voice notes. I personally haven't got on board with voice notes yet, but I can certainly see how that may help.
I'm beginning to think maybe you love Teams a bit too much. I mean, you do talk about it quite a lot.
I do. So maybe that's maybe I've got a side gig as a Microsoft person. So what this really component really means for you is, ensuring your staff have the technology to allow them to continue to engage, collaborate, and communicate with each other. Offer support to improve home working setups where possible, but really try and think how technology can improve previous ways of working rather than simply replicating them. Oh, and sorry, what is Mural in from Christine? It's at its simplest, effectively an online whiteboard, which allows sort of virtual participants to all collaborate in a shared space. Now, it does a lot more than that, and really helps to bring teams together to brainstorm, solve problems, plan. They offer a great trial. Actually, it sounds like I'm a software salesman today. So I would certainly check it out. We've been big fans of it here.
They've also got just a great collection of templates. They sort of just give you the answer to everything, and you can just rebrand it to make it work for you. Absolutely,
yeah. You can make like you've done a lot of work, whereas Mural's done it for you in the background.
Yeah.
So we just move on one. So is this about workforce management? And this is all about reviewing where you deploy your resources, and really considering that split across both virtual and physical locations. And someone that's had to sort of deal with this potentially more than others is Sodexo. So for those who don't know, they provide a host of services to both private and public companies, and have both frontline and sort of office-based workers, and have actually, where possible, tried to redeploy displaced frontline employers in other parts of their business, or have worked with partner organizations to keep them employed and working. And for their office-based workforce, they've even gone to the length of splitting them into a team A and team B, where 1 week a team is at home and 1 week a team is in the office. And this has been done to help minimize the risk of infection, enhance employee confidence, and help to support business continuity. And then questions are coming in thick and fast. And another one, maybe Neela, pass this to you. What is the best way for us to select who can work from home? Working from home may be seen as a privilege, so how do we select the right roles for it?
That's a good question. It is part of the model. Yeah, so it is a privilege. I would say that you need to think about two core things, you know, without giving you sort of a detailed PowerPoint deck on it, but two core things. The first one needs to be around understanding employee preferences and voice of employee. You know, we talk a lot about voice of customer, but bringing that internally and understanding your employees. Who actually wants it? You can't just assume that everybody wants this way of working. The second component that you need to think alongside employee preferences is around specific role requirements. You know, it might be that certain roles have great collaboration needs and other roles are actually okay working from home majority of the time. So blend of role-specific analysis and employee preferences will help you come up with you know, at least a first draft of who you should be offering this to. I also have a great comment that I wanted to share with you from David, and it says, it's on the tech question. I use spatial chat like Zoom, but you can move around the room to be nearer people you want to see and hear, and away from people you don't want to hear, a bit like the pub, really. I've never heard of this, but it sounds great.
It does. That
sounds fantastic.
Something to check out afterwards for sure.
Yeah,
so
thank you, David. Brilliant. Should we pop the slides back on? Great. Okay, so James just walked us through the enable layer. And as we said earlier, actually a lot of organizations, you know, have thought about those things because they were fundamental to being able to operate from home. But, you know, it's quite likely that they haven't thought about the next layer up, the connect layer as much. And so I'll just talk about the building and maintaining communities now. When people are physically together, it's quite easy for us to build bonds with colleagues, coffees and sharing meals and pre-meeting chit chat and catching up after the weekend. But when you're working remotely, opportunities to have these spontaneous interactions don't present themselves as much. And what that means is that over time, you're weakening informal bonds across your organization, which, you know, might save you a bit of time, but what that then does is reduce empathy across your workforce, so that, you know, I might ask James to work late quite regularly because my level of empathy has reduced, and it leads to feelings of loneliness. And so this is, you know, especially quite difficult for new joiners. They don't have that historical set of shared experiences to use during difficult times and to ask for support and to learn new things. So the key thing around the Connect building communities component is that you need to be proactively thinking about how you provide opportunities to strengthen informal bonds, both within teams but also across teams as well, so that, you know, you're not just providing opportunities within HR, but HR has an opportunity to talk to IT and, you know, sales, for example. And then you also need to be thinking about how you connect employees to the organization's purpose. So, you know, continuing that level of attachment between employee and organizational brand, and then also providing an opportunity for connection across employee and leadership. You don't want to just be fostering that from a peer-to-peer level as well. And, you know, if you're thinking about all those elements, you're likely to foster more virtual or hybrid communities as well. And I'll give you an example of an organization that's done this really well. Salesforce. So if you haven't come across Salesforce before, they provide customer relationship management services and applications. And they have some fantastic offices with free drinks and snacks and just generally great views. But they are generally very good at thinking about connecting employees and being quite intentional about building relationships within their organization. So when they then transition to remote working, to keep that sense of community alive, the first thing that they did was they quite verbally advocated for frequent real-time communication. So the sort of, collaboration that you might have when you're brainstorming with your teams in person. So explicitly saying it out loud, step one. Step two is supporting that with the right infrastructure. So they set up a Power of Us hub, so an online community where customers, partners, and employees could all come together. It's a virtual meeting place. You can learn from each other, catch up, get answers, and generally continue to build a community. So they've sort of gone the next level up, and it's not just about fostering a community across employees, but it's thinking, well, how do we continue to do that with our customers as well? So that's a great example there. And I'll take you on to the next part of the Connect layer. So left-hand side, we have communities. Right-hand side, we have consciously designing the physical and remote split. So, definitely thinking about what flexible working options you're providing your workforce. It's unlikely that, rolling out a blanket policy that says everybody, needs to work from home 4 days a week is going to be the right answer for your organization. You'll need to do a bit of work to find out what the right solution is and how you break that down per different functions and different roles. And then as a result of that, reviewing your locations and your offices, and then also thinking about, well, what does the physical role of the office, what is that going forward? Is that more of a collaboration hub now, or is it more of a place to come and learn, or just to talk to clients? Like what's the purpose of the office going forward?
I just thought I'd just jump in on that, a couple of retail, maybe just elements of,
yes, all yours.
Of that as well. And absolutely everything you've said there. And we did say earlier that this predominantly office based, this model, but I think specifically in this component, clearly is impacting retail a lot more, as the role of bricks and mortar shops is being continually challenged by an increase in online shopping. So just to bring that to life, John Lewis unfortunately closing 8 stores permanently, but they're actually looking to transfer staff to their Waitrose stores or the company's online arms, as they estimate between 60 and 70% of this year's sales will be online, and therefore trying to redeploy that workforce and invest in e-commerce. TM Lewin, I think one thing that lockdown has shown, that we aren't wearing shirt and ties as much as we are, unfortunately. So they did go into administration last June and will be closing all of their UK stores, but they're actually moving to a completely online model only. So on a slightly more positive note, I think some research has shown that actually digitally native brands now have an opportunity to test physical stores, as sort of real estate options are potentially now cheaper in the sort of pandemic. So it's sort of quite an interesting juxtaposition between more traditional organizations are moving to an online model and potentially reducing their bricks and mortar footprint, while organizations that have started sort of purely online are now considering opening stores. I mean, you may have seen it in the news today. Amazon opened their first physical store in the UK today. So pure play online, now opening physical stores in the UK. And then and just sort of reiterating what Neela was saying around office-based organizations. Offices no longer need to just be a place where you give somewhere a place to sit. How are we improving collaboration and innovation through different types of spaces? So I think lots to think about in this space, both from retail and office point of view. But back to you, Neela, for the rest of the components.
Thank you. So we've thought about enable, we've thought about connect, and now the final part, the evolve layer. So taking a look at your digital workforce strategy. So before I break that down, we always advocate that strategy needs to be the first thing to tackle in an organization. But the reason why we address those other components first was that we've noticed that there are a few things that need to be fixed pretty quickly across those other components. But normally what we would say is strategy first, and then you're using that to trickle down across all components. So the first point around strategy being you need to be very clear on the purpose for designing your version of a digital workforce, whether that's hybrid or whether that's fully remote, or whatever looks like for you. So what's your purpose? Is it to create an enhanced employee experience? Is it to attract global talent? Or is it to save money and close offices, whatever that is for you? So being very clear on your purpose. The second point is around aligning your digital workforce strategy across your business, overarching business strategy. So what you can sometimes find is that when people talk about digital workforce, they think, right, well, this is solely an IT issue, therefore it's going to come out of IT, or this is solely a HR issue because it's about people, right? This is going to come out of HR. Or even, well, we've told everyone to work from home and now it's up to the comms function to get the right, email campaigns out to make this happen. But for this to really work, it needs to sit across all of those functions, so they're all working together to achieve the same purpose. And very quickly then, an organization that is very clear on their strategy and the why behind that is Twitter. They actually encourage their workers to work remotely back in 2018, so definitely ahead of the curve. And their purpose was very much centered around employee experience and global talent there. So we will now go on to the final component. So employee-centric process redesign. Bit of a mouthful, but this is actually my favorite component. So this is all about reviewing your employee life cycle and all the processes that sit around that, and making sure that they are fit for purpose for the new model that you will be implementing. So whether it's onboarding or appraisals or all of that sort of stuff, does that work for a hybrid environment or a fully remote or fully, whatever you're going for? And as you're doing that, being quite intentional about identifying meaningful moments or moments that matter, or whatever phrase you like to use. What are those moments that spark joy in your workforce and make you feel quite good about coming into work? How can you replicate that in your future model? So I'll just give you an example. At Gate 1, when we were in the office, we used to go on a new joiner lunch, and it was typically at Wagamama. That was quite nice. It was a great experience for the new joiner, and great for us because we got a nice free lunch, whenever someone new joined us. So thinking about, if you've identified that's something special, how do you begin to also do that in your new model? And Slack is a business communications platform, and they've been quite intentional about all of this. So for them, onboarding and helping people adjust to the company culture is something that's really important to them. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, they thought, well, we obviously can't fly all of our employees to San Francisco for a week and continue with our live sessions. So they transitioned everything to the virtual world and made it appropriate for the virtual world, so sessions weren't as long and it wasn't as exhausting, removed all paperwork, and ensured that they included a lot more culture and values conversations. So all that stuff that you might just pick up by osmosis when you're in the office gave people an opportunity to talk about that online and talk to leaders as well. So that's a good example there.
We've actually got, sorry, Nidja, I know you're just going to move on to summarize, but another question, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
How do we start to update our employee processes to ensure they are fit for purpose in a hybrid working environment?
Very good question. I say that it needs to all begin with empathy. And so taking the time to understand what's important to your employees and how things actually work, and whether the way that it's done now is quite right. And so what we do at Gate 1 is use a methodology called design thinking, which puts the process lead or the to-be design expert into the the shoes of the person experiencing the process and beginning from there. So definitely starting with empathy and beginning to understand what it's like for the receiver, not just for you as the person designing it.
Perfect, excellent. So, and I think it's back to you, but I thought that was just useful to cover off.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pause here and just say, you know, we've been doing a lot of talk and covering quite a few case studies. So as a bit of a recap, this is the model on a page again, and I'll just pause for a second and see if there are any more questions coming in. Not a problem if not, that's completely fine.
No worries. Yeah, we'll have some time. Oh, we got one in the chat, maybe?
Yeah, it's a very long question. Right. Do you see temporary part-time workspaces, WeWork style spaces, becoming more popular? There is a more geographically dispersed workforce, as well as having owned offices. Do you think people will use these more? If there is more of a geographical spread, some people may need practicalities of an office without needing to go to the HQ. Do you see anything like this taking off, or other alternatives to just home and HQ office? That was a lot of pressure reading that to everyone in case I made a mistake. Yes, I do see that becoming more popular going forward. So, you know, if you're giving your workforce the flexibility to be able to work from anywhere they like, they might still want the opportunity to catch up people who live in their local areas at some point. So whether, you know, it's having the opportunity to pop into a WeWork once a week with people who live in, you know, Bristol, for example, because a lot of people have moved to Bristol, or whether it's the opportunity to be able to work from a cool new cafe, I do think that's going to form part of the approach going forward.
And then we've got another one, Nila, just coming in from Daryl. I love a good pyramid, and this one is great. Yep, who doesn't love a pyramid? Against the backdrop of annual engagement surveys, and regardless of the organizational workforce model, how are organizations measuring the impact of this change with regard to people? Probably a couple of bits within that. Do you want to go first? It gives me another 30 seconds to think.
Yeah, I was just digesting it. I think what organizations are doing is continuing with the traditional way of measuring it, which is Gallup surveys and, you know, less frequent, longer surveys, as opposed to that sort of more regular, ongoing feedback and pulse surveys, and, you know, just keeping an eye on how people are feeling on a day-to-day or a weekly basis. So I think it's still being done in the more traditional way, as opposed to a way that I think is a little bit more appropriate for the situation that we're in now.
Yeah, agreed. Conscious of time, but please don't stop asking questions. We'll just move on to the next section if that's okay. So Alice, we can bring the slides back up. We move on one. So yeah, so conscious we've you know, gone through a lot of theory about how to design this new digital workforce. But obviously a common question we get asked is, how do you actually get started on this process? So over the next couple of slides, you know, we'll hopefully provide some guidance and tips from our own experience on the pitfalls to avoid and what you can do as leaders straight away. So I'll just kick off with how to avoid some common pitfalls. So I think all are relatively straightforward, but all are super important. So the first is listen to your people. Make sure you engage with your workforce to understand what they really want and need. I think, you know, as we see, everyone is different, and gathering as much insight and data as possible can ensure you're implementing the most important initiatives. So co-design, so, you know, obviously taking insight from your staff is one thing, but if you really bring them, you know, into the design process and into that journey, we believe, you know, this will improve buy-in and adoption as you roll out the new initiatives. Excuse me. And then as you start to roll out things, don't try and solve everything at once. You know, use the insight and design work to identify what you can pilot and test quickly and see what works. Use quick feedback loops to tweak the design, and then, you know, only look to scale once you really have a proven solution. And lastly, balance global to local. So, this may only apply to larger organizations, but you may well have to think about the difference of global and local initiatives. So, we believe that designing globally where possible will ensure that, there's commonality across the organization and drives a sense of community. But then implementing on a local scale will allow you to make the tweaks to the design to fit the specific needs of a department, region, or team. So back to Neela and take you through some ideas of what you can do immediately to get the ball rolling.
Thank you. Yes, I know that we've hit times. We've had a lot of questions coming in today, so I won't keep you for much longer. But after this session, we're going to share a checklist for leaders and organizations as a whole of things that you could be doing right now across every single component across those 3 layers. So I won't take you through all of that now because there's a lot there, but I wanted to leave you with 3 recommendations. So if you only remember 3 things, let it be these 3 things. And the first one is around taking ownership for being a digital native. So if you want your workforce to do a certain thing or behave in a certain way or use a certain tool, you need to very explicitly role model that and do it first. The second is fix your top 2 employee experience processes. Talk to your people, figure out what they are, and co-design those 2 employee experience processes. And then the final point, and I sort of covered it in the second point, but listen to your people and alleviate fears about out of sight, out of mind. So let people know that they're not being forgotten about just because they're at home and you're not getting to sort of have a cup of tea with them every other day. So those were my 3 key points for leaders, and just to do a bit of a overall summary of designing a digital workforce, then I wanted to leave you with this. Imitation only lasts for so long, so the whole fake it till you make it, not sure that quite works in this environment. So you need to be a little bit proactive and think through your digital workforce strategy and working through those components to bring that to life. And if you do that and you think about all those different elements we've covered today, you're more likely to have a workforce that isn't out of sight, out of mind.
Okay, I think final one from me, then we'll just move on. So yeah, really just to say thanks for attending and listening today. I hope it's been useful. We've really enjoyed designing this and presenting today. We'll follow up with copies of slides and a recording of this webinar. But in terms of further information, our website has a number of points of views, case studies, and insights which are freely available. But really, do feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's question, observation, or simply to kick a problem around. Our email addresses are at the bottom of the page. Hopefully you got to most questions, but we'll be staying on the call for a bit if there is anything else. So please feel free to drop us a question and we'll answer them. But for those that have to go, on behalf of myself and Neela and Alice, massive thanks for joining today. Have a great day, and yeah, hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye. Excellent. I think that was it for the questions.
I think, yeah, we'll just see anyone staying around.
What excited you most about the new normal?
New normal.
I'm not sure I can listen to that term anymore. It's been used so frequently.
What is normal anymore?
I think it was all the extra time for me. It was not having to commute an hour and 45 minutes to be able to see my clients and to be able to get to the office. That was quite nice for me.
I think the challenge with that one though is, I used to have to commute an hour and 45 each way to a client. Am I doing whatever it is I can't do the maths, three and a bit hours of productivity stuff? Maybe not, spending an extra hour in bed. So yeah, I think where possible, being able to use that extra hour is really critical. But yeah, personally, been a bit of a challenge not to just enjoy a bit more of a rest.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think thanks again, everyone. Is anyone still on the line? We'll probably end it there. But yeah, we'll reach out with slides and recording. So thanks again, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.